Yo, this is your boy Dave and Copenhagen. What's up? How you guys doing? Hope you're all fine. You guys doing good, right? Yeah. I'm in Copenhagen, just exploring the city. Just know what's up. Let me see what's up in the city. Exploring everywhere as much as you can. But Copenhagen's a beautiful city though. Really cozy place to be, and I'm happy to be here. I want to explore it more, just want to join in. So I'm gonna be taking their harbor tour now. So let's see what's up.
You will find life vests underneath your seats. Smoking is not allowed on board, and up here in front we have a fine yellow line. You're not allowed to cross that one either, but apart from that, welcome on board. My name is Lisa. I will be your guide today. And up in front we have Frank, and he is going to be our captain for the next hour. Så god eftermiddag, mine damer og herrer, og hjertelig velkommen ombord. Allerførst så skal jeg bede om jeres fulde opmærksomhed, fordi jeres sikkerhed har vores højeste prioritet, og det er derfor rigtig vigtigt, at I nu lytter godt efter, og at I følger mine instruktioner på turen. Vi kommer til at sejle under en del vævebroer i dag, og hver gang vi sejler under en bro, så er det vigtigt, at alle voksne såvel som børn forbliver siddende. Man må ikke røre ved bordet. I kan finde redningsveste under jeres sæde. Det er ikke til at ryge ombord heroppe foran, så har vi altså en god linje, det må man altså heller ikke overskride. Men bortset fra det, så er hjertelig velkommen. Jeg skal hedder Lisa, jeg skal være guide her de næste timer, og på en tid sidder Frank, og han skal selvfølgelig være vores kaptajn. Inden vi sejler videre her, så skal jeg lige sikre mig, at vi har nogle gæster, som gerne vil have, at vi tager turen på dansk. Vi tager den selvfølgelig på engelsk, men hvis man gerne vil have, at vi tager turen på dansk, så vil jeg lige søge og række en arm eller et ben i vejret, for ellers så tager vi den altså kun på engelsk. Det ser ud som om, vi kun har folk, der vil have den på engelsk. So ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to do this tour in English today. But we will be starting here in Nyhavn or New Haven. And it was built back in the year 2008. And when they decided to build this building, they also gave sustainability a little bit of a thought. Because believe it or not, Copenhagen can actually be quite a hot city during summer, 35 degrees Celsius. So of course we need to cool the building down. And we can do so by using the water from the harbor. We can actually direct it through the walls, through the buildings, and thereby keeping the temperature inside low. Perhaps you can also see here in the first floor of the building, maybe you can see some mirrors up there, because this is where the actors and the actresses, this is where their changing rooms have been located. Usually you will put them somewhere down into the basement, but here they said no, the people working for us, they actually deserve to have a lovely view every time they come here to work. So they have put their mirrors and their changing rooms up here to let it. So starting to come up in front of us, a little bit to the right, you are going to be able to see a bright building, a modern building, a bright building with a funny looking roof. And this is the Opera. It was built here in the year 2005, and it was a gift from the Maersk Foundation, the big Danish container shipping line. The architect behind it was called Henning Larsen. And the roof is quite interesting, as you are going to see, because sometimes during summer there is actually a jumping competition taking place here from the roof, where people can jump into the harbor 27 meters. But I have to say only professionals are allowed to do it. But as we get closer to the building, a lot of people are standing there at the moment, they don't know what's going on. But if you look through the windows in a few seconds here to the right, through the windows of the building, you are going to see three very big chandeliers. And these big chandeliers, they were created by an Icelandic artist called
That's the opera building.
And every time there is an event, opera taking place inside, especially during winter when it's dark out here, these three chandeliers, they will light up not only the building, but more or less the entire harbor. But the auditorium inside, there are actually two auditoriums, and because of the fire hazard, they were brought out here to the area. are going skiing. Coming up here to the right, in the distance you can see a grey ship. It's an old frigate. It's a P5 on the side of it. Now this old frigate used to belong to the Danish Navy during the Cold War. But back in 1982 there was a little incident on board this ship, because by accident they actually launched a missile. And this missile landed in an area with a lot of summer houses and summer cabins, thereby completely destroying 4 of these summer houses. But thank God this happened in January and nobody was home, so nobody got injured apart from the 4 summer houses. But nevertheless it was not exactly that practice only in the military of the Danish Navy, but nowadays it has been in English and in the winter you can see that you can also nowadays we don't have a lot of Navy left in Copenhagen anymore, but we do have a little area out here called the brewery sisters. So coming up to the right, you're still going to be able to see a lot of yellow buildings. So on the other one, you're going to see one of the black roads, the so-called brewery sisters. Here are the education of our sailors taking place here in the area. But in front of the yellow buildings, you can also see that there is a green rampart. And standing on top of this green rampart, there are quite a few cabins. And every morning at 8 o'clock, one of these cabins is actually fired, so that all of the ships here that are below now it's time to hoist the Danish flag. And in the evening, at sunset, it is fired once more, so that all of the ships know now it's time to take the Danish flag down again. So that's how we do it. Also here to the right, you can now see quite a few houseboats, because nowadays we don't have a lot of big ships coming into the harbor anymore. So nowadays the harbor has actually become a place for living. So we are going to see quite a few houseboats here in the harbor today. We're also going to see some containers where people they live. So coming up after the song, here to the right you can see some containers, grey and blue and green and blue water, and it says Urban Rigger on the side of these containers. These are all containers that have been turned into students' accommodation. Once again, it was the idea of gardening as the one who also gave us in the incinerator. Oh, to the right, you can also see 2 very big grey buildings. It says Sightseeing on one of them. This used to be an old shipyard, the Burmeister and Grain shipyard. We were actually building ships in Copenhagen up until the 1990s. Now it doesn't make sense anymore, and we have kept the old buildings from the shipyard, and they are basically being used for events of different kinds, for example, concerts. And over here to the right, you can now also see some containers, red and orange, and a very big crane over here to the right. This area is called Nordhavn, the Northern Harbor, and this is where Copenhagen will be expanding in the years to come. So the container terminals that you can see here right now, they will be moving out a little bit further, and in the years to come we're going to build a gigantic skyline over there. So basically a completely new neighborhood where people they can come and live. Because at the moment in the greater area of Copenhagen there are about 1.3 million people living, but every year about 5,000 people are moving to Copenhagen. So we do need a lot of new accommodation. But enough about that. Right now we are on our way to meet and greet our Little Mermaid. And she is of course a popular figure from a fairy tale written by the Danish author Christiansborg. And it is basically a story about a mermaid who falls in love with a prince. And therefore she decides to leave the ocean. But unfortunately it turns out he does not fall in love with our Little Mermaid, so he decides to marry a princess instead. And therefore the Little Mermaid returns to the sea, to the ocean. She jumps into the ocean where she dissolves into foam at the surface of the sea. So no happy ending for our Little Mermaid in the original version. But we have a Little Mermaid here in Copenhagen. We love her here. So coming up here to the right, you're soon going to see a statue of her. She has been sitting out here in this area at Langedine since 1913. She was created by a sculptor called Edvard Eriksen, and she was a gift, you can see her here to the right. She was a gift from a man called Carl Jacobsen, and Carl Jacobsen, he was the son of the founder of the big Danish beer company Carlsberg. So you can see the back of the Little Mermaid over here to the right. And as you can see right now, the Little Mermaid is probably enjoying herself and all the visitors out here. Unfortunately, this has not always been the case, because she has been decapitated twice. Once we actually found her head, it was lying in the water behind her, but the other time we actually had to get her a completely new head. And there was also one evening when two young Danish men, they had been drinking a little bit too much alcohol, so they came up with the idea to cut off one of her arms. So she needed a new arm. They felt bad about it the next morning, so they actually told the police, but nevertheless she had lost her arm. And people, they are still throwing paint at her and putting on, they're dressing her up in funny clothing, basically to make political statements. So yeah, the life of a mermaid here in Copenhagen can be brutish, nasty and short, but thank God our little mermaid is a tough cookie, so somehow she always manages to find her way back, and of course we are quite happy about that. Windows in it. This is where you can find the headquarters of Maersk, the big Danish container shipping line. At the moment, Maersk is the second biggest container shipping line in the world. Maersk is a Danish family name, and it means something like the marsh land. And up until this day, Maersk is still a family-run business. And if you look closely, you're soon going to be able to see the logo of Maersk. It's a white seven-pointed star on a blue background. And the story behind this logo is actually, well, a love story, I can tell you. Because the founder of Maersk, he was a captain. And at the end of the 19th century, he was on board a ship and he had brought his wife with him. But one evening, his wife, she became very sick, very ill. So, of course, he was worried. So he decided in the middle of the night to go out on deck and he started to pray. But it was a very cloudy night. But as he started to pray, clouds they disappeared and all of a sudden he could see the white seven-pointed star. The next morning, the doctor from the ship came to him and said, I've got good news for you. Your wife, she has actually made it. She's going to be absolutely fine. And that was the moment when he decided that the white seven-pointed star, you can see over here to the right, should be the logo of his new company. Here to the right, you can now see a red building, and if you look through the windows, you can see quite a few statues here. This is because this is where you can find the Royal Cast collection. The three buildings that are coming up here to the right, two red and one yellow, one in the middle, are old warehouses from the 18th century. A museum in the first one, and the next two that are coming up here to the right. Well, people can live here, there are apartments in them. But right now we are not far from another, if not apartment, then at least residence. We are not far from the Royal Palace and Maidenborg. This is where the royal family lives. And Maidenborg was built in the year 1749, and originally it was built for 4 noble families. And therefore, as you can see here to the right, it consists of 4 different buildings or 4 different palaces. But 1794, the original royal palace in Copenhagen, the first Christiansborg Castle, got destroyed by a fire. So the royal family, they decided to move out here temporarily. But apparently they liked it so much out here, they never wanted to go back to the Christiansborg Palace, even though it was rebuilt. Now our king, Frederick X, his lovely wife, our new queen Mary, and their 4 children, they live in the building here to the right, the white building with the roof, the Frederick's Church, or the Marble Church as we call it, because it was built partly with marble from Norway. They also started to build this church back in the year 1749, but for different reasons. It wasn't completed until 145 years later. The church does look a little bit like the Peter's Church in Rome in Italy, and that's also where they got their inspiration for the church, for the design. But the church always was, and still is, a Lutheran church. Although I do have to tell you that's not the way most Lutheran churches look like here in Denmark. The area here to the right is called Clemens Beach, basically a square. During summer there are a lot of open air activities taking place here. Opera, ballet, yoga, Sunday mornings. You can come here by car because located underneath the square is of course a car park. And speaking of cars, if you look to the left, well first of all you can see a bus in the water, the yellow boat. This is one of our harbour buses, so it's part of our public transportation system. All of our harbour buses nowadays, they run on electricity. But then you can of course also here to the left see the park, the Opera Park. And this park was a gift from the Maersk Foundation once again, and it opened about 1 year ago. And located underneath the park is of course another underground car park, so people they can actually also take their car if they want to go to the opera. And then of course also coming up to the left a little bit in front of us, but you're going to see it on the left side shortly, some new modern buildings that we are building here at the moment. The area is called Papirø, the paper island, and this was where we used to keep paper for all of our newspapers. We don't need to do that anymore, so now we are building new apartments here as well. And a few months ago, the most expensive apartment ever in Copenhagen was sold from this area. It was a penthouse apartment, 200 square meters. The price, well, approximately 9.5 million euros. We don't know who bought it, I can tell you I didn't. Nevertheless. Then of course also here to the left you can now see the grey buildings they are still building here. This is going to be a so-called water culture house, we call it. It's basically going to be a few buildings that have some, well, different kinds of swimming pools inside it. They should all be completed sometime next year. Now we are entering an area called Christianshavn, which means Christianshavn. It is named after the famous builder King Christian IV. When he became king in the 17th century, Copenhagen was a small and dirty medieval city, but he decided to expand the city and turn it into a big and beautiful Renaissance city. So he built a lot of buildings in the city, and he also built the Copenhagen fortifications. But he also built Christianshavn where we are now, because he was very much inspired by Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and therefore he wanted to create a neighborhood here in Copenhagen that should resemble Amsterdam. So he invited a lot of Dutch craftsmen and also a lot of Dutch merchants to come and live here in the area, but they never really wanted to, so instead a lot of Danes moved in. And nowadays this is an area where you can see a lot of houseboats. And this is also where you can find the Church of Our Saviour, which is a church that has a rather unique spire with a golden staircase located outside of the spire. But I'm going to show you when we get there. Because right now we are approaching a bridge, so please remain seated. Once we have sailed under the bridge, we will be in a residential area. And this means I am not allowed to use the microphone for a while. So you can just lean back and enjoy the ride through the canal for the next 10 minutes. bridge coming up, so please remain seated. Once we have sailed under the bridge, you should be looking up to the left, and then you will be able to see the spire of the Church of Our Savior. Here to the right, approximately 4 o'clock, you can now see the oldest part of the Royal Library, the red building here to the right, and you can see the black diamond has more or less been glued onto the old building, and you can even drive your car through the black diamond, the modern building here. Coming up in front of us, and you're going to see it on the left hand side shortly, a dark green building. This modern building was built back in the year 2017. It's called Blocks, and if you go inside the building you can visit the Danish Architecture Center. The building looks a little bit like containers. Some people say, and other people say it looks a little bit like the Danish toy Lego, but you can decide for yourself. But right now we are entering another canal, the Frederikssunds Canal. There are quite a few bridges in this canal, so the first 2 bridges are coming up, one right after the other, so please remain seated. The building over here to the right, the red building, this is the brew house of our King Christian IV from the 17th century. Back then, when Christian IV was still alive, you couldn't drink the water in Copenhagen. It was basically, well, unhealthy, we just put it like that. But of course, you had to come up with an alternative, and the most reasonable thing to do was to drink beer. So at that time, every soldier, he would get 10 liters of beer a day that he could share with his family. So literally everybody was drinking beer. But I have to say there was not a lot of
beer instead of water.
It was relatively okay that
in the
children
70s.
were drinking.
Can you imagine that?
The red boat or the red ship here to the right is actually a former lighthouse or a lightship. We had several of these light ships located along the coasts here in Denmark, but of course we don't need them anymore. So nowadays you can actually rent them for events. The area to the right is called the Castle Island, or the Island of Power, because this is where our parliament is located. But we are going to see the front side of that a little bit later on as well. We have another bridge coming up, so please remain seated. Here to the right, the white building, the bright building that you can see here, this is the back of the Christiansborg Palace. And today, it's whatever is left of the first Christiansborg Palace that got destroyed by a fire in the year 1794. And today, just like back then, this is where you can find the royal stables and also the royal riding hall. Nowadays, the royal family still have about 25 horses. We have another bridge coming up, so please remain seated. And sometimes you can meet royal horses on the streets in Copenhagen because they have to get used to the traffic. So it is actually quite common to meet our white royal horses. The yellow building here to the left, this is the Danish National Museum. But we have another bridge coming up. This will be the shortest and the most narrow bridge on the entire tour. So it is important that everybody remain seated. Mind your head, keep your hands, arms and elbows in the boat. And this means that we are over here to the right, we have a gentleman who has put his hand out. Could you please take the hand into the boat? Thank you.
tiny. I got a bridge so be tiny like this. And it's just okay. Are we safe? Yeah, we're safe. We made it through the bridge, the tiny bridge. Yo, we made it through the tiny bridge. Look at how tiny it is. Whoa, damn.
Here to the left you can now see the old quarters in Copenhagen. As a city, Copenhagen is quite old. It was founded in the year 1167 by a bishop called Absalom. But if you walk through the old town of Copenhagen, you are not going to find any buildings that are that old. Because in the 18th century there were two very big fires that destroyed most of our buildings. So therefore nowadays most buildings they are not more than 200 or 250 years old. Coming up to the right, you're soon going to be able to see a yellow building, and this is a museum, the Thorvaldsen Museum. And Thorvaldsen, he was a Danish artist from the 19th century. He spent most of his life in Rome, more than 40 years in Rome in Italy. And he was, you can say, an artist, a sculptor. He actually made a lot of marble statues. And he even made a marble statue of Pope Sixtus of the Pope Sixtus II that is actually being used in the Peter's Church in Rome. So he is the only non-Catholic artist who ever got to do a statue of a Pope in the Peter's Church. The museum itself was the first public museum that opened in Denmark in the 19th century. Everybody was allowed to go inside as long as they were decently dressed. The area to the left is called the Old Beach, and this was where the so-called fishermen's wives would come in every morning to sell the fish that their husbands had caught the night before. They lived 10-15 kilometers north of Copenhagen, and every morning they would walk in on their feet. It got modernized a little bit throughout history, but the last fisherman's wife retired back in the year 2008. Also coming up on the left, you're soon going to see a statue, a man sitting on his horse, and this is the Bishop Absalom, the founder of Copenhagen. But we have another bridge coming up, so please remain seated. Thank you. Christiansborg Palace, and this was where the royal family used to live up until 1794, when the first Christiansborg Palace got destroyed by a fire. Then they decided to rebuild the palace, and the second Christiansborg Palace got destroyed by a fire in the year 1884. So what we are looking at here is actually the third Christiansborg Palace. It was completed in the year 1928. Today, this is the home of the royal reception rooms, so this is where the king is usually welcoming new ambassadors to Denmark. But it is, and the left side of the building is also home of the Danish parliament. Our new king, Frederick X, he was actually pronounced king from the balcony of the palace on the 14th of January this year. So we don't have a big coronation ceremony like they do in the UK, where they go into a church and put crowns on people's heads. We actually just shouted out from the balcony here. On the 14th of January, 175,000 Danes were standing in front of the palace, and they had been waiting for hours to be a part of this. We have a bridge coming up. Please remain seated. To the right, you can now see something that is not there, because this is where the old stock exchange used to be. Now this year the old stock exchange was supposed to celebrate its 400th anniversary. It was built by Christian IV in the 17th century. The very special thing about the building was that it was one of the few buildings that had never been destroyed by a fire until the 16th of April this year, where half of the building burned down. The firefighters managed to save one half of the building. It is now being hidden, or it is hiding behind the scaffolding here over to the right. But of course we are going to rebuild the old stock exchange. We have just started to do so.
Okay.
We have another bridge coming up, so please remain seated. So here to the left, the dark building that you can see here, this is the National Bank. It was designed in the 1970s by a Danish architect called Arne Jacobsen. He actually also designed a lot of furniture like the egg and the swan. And here to the right you can now see the kayak bar where a lot of young people love to hang out during summer. Sometimes you can even rent a kayak here free of charge, as long as you agree to pick up garbage and trash from the harbor. So basically this is a way of keeping the harbor clean. And of course we have another bridge coming up, so please remain seated. So as we are leaving the Danish Parliament and the Island of Power, you can look here to the right, and this is where you can find some of the helpers of the politicians. Because the three buildings, yellow buildings over here to the right, this is where you can find the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But right now we have of course reached the harbor here in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen in Danish is called Copenhagen, and it means the harbor of merchants. So obviously the harbor has been very important to us. And up until the 1990s it was still a very active harbor, so we had a lot of commercial ships coming into the harbor and also a lot of industrial areas located along the harbor. This is not profitable anymore, so no big commercial ships are coming into the harbor nowadays. But this also means that the harbor that used to be very dirty and polluted has become very clean. In fact, the water is nowadays so clean you can actually go swimming in it if you like. You are of course not allowed to go swimming anywhere you like. You are only allowed to do so at the designated areas. Here to the left you can now see a bright green building, and it's an old custom house built in the 1930s. Later on the building was being used as a part of the ferry terminals for the ferries heading for Sweden before we got the bridge back in the year 2000, and nowadays there is a private club in there. And also coming up here on the left you can now see some yellow balls in the water, and this is where you can find a so-called harbor bath or a sea bath. So this is one of the areas where you are allowed to go and to jump into the harbor to go for a swim free of charge. You can do it all year round. So if you don't know what to do tomorrow morning, just jump into your bathing suit and come down here to the harbor and go for a swim. And right now we are going to sail under another bridge. It's so tall we shouldn't have to sit down here, but you can see here to the right a beautiful white bridge, the so-called Inner Harbor Bridge, a bridge for pedestrians and for bicycles only. We also call the bridge the Kissing Bridge, not because people they meet on this bridge to kiss each other, but because the bridge can actually open, and every time it closes again it looks as though the two parts of the bridge are actually kissing each other. slowly making our way into Nyhavn or New Haven again. If you look to the right after this blue boat, you can see a building with the number 67, a white building here to the right with a black roof, the number 67. This was where the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen used to live in the 19th century. He actually lived in several buildings here in the harbour. I'm going to show you one more a little bit later. But Hans Christian Andersen, the one who wrote the fairy tale of the Little Mermaid and the Ugly Duckling and a lot of other fairy tales as well. But of course we have one final bridge coming up. But there is a little bit of traffic here, so we just have to wait for another boat that made it to the bridge before us. We have our flaming bridge coming up now, so please remain seated. When we have sailed under the bridge, you can look to the left and then you're going to see two big red buildings. One of them has the number 20. That will be another place where the writer Hans Christian Andersen used to live. So they are coming up here on our left-hand side shortly. Behind the white boat here on the left. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we have almost made it back to Nyhavn now. So the Captain Frank and I, we do hope you have enjoyed today's tour with us here in the harbour of Copenhagen. We have enjoyed having you on board. Please remain seated until the captain tells you that you can safely leave the boat. And also very important, please remember to bring all of your belongings with you. And then of course we would like to take the opportunity to wish you a nice and pleasant evening here in Copenhagen. So thank you very much everybody for coming along today.
It was really nice, very nice one. And it was good, Thank you Copenhagen.